Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Bros Talking Soccer. We're here for an interview podcast today with our friend Christian Sandler, one of our most frequent, if not the most frequent, visitor on the podcast. Christian, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I believe I do hold the title for that, so I plan on keeping that.
Okay, yeah. So I am Christian, by the way. I don't know if I actually said that.
You did.
Dave is away. He's still in Fiji, doing whatever you do when you're in Fiji. I guess jumping off waterfalls, as he sent us.
Or drinking stuff, probably both.
He might be, but he's with Kristen, so I don't know how much drinking. They stay pretty healthy, so I don't know how much drinking's happening. But, hopefully they're having fun doing what they do. Yeah, so I guess we'll hop right in and talk about some stuff. All right, so first question for you this week is going to be, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you really got into soccer and I guess just general history of yourself?
Yeah, man. So I was born up here in Princeton, was not there for long, moved down to Tampa, Florida. That's where I grew up. I lived down there for almost 20 years. Came back up here to go to Penn State. And that's really when soccer happened for me. I played baseball and tennis as a kid. Soccer was not really a big thing in Florida. It's all football and baseball down there. At least it was during my time. So I was introduced to soccer briefly in high school. I had a friend who was an Everton fan, and I'm like, "What's Everton?"
Well, that's gross.
Yeah. So I had no idea. One day he brought over FIFA 12. So this would have been 2011 when I would, graduating high school, somewhere in that frame. And he's like, "You guys got to pick a team," and I was like, I don't know what that means. But we're scrolling through, and all I knew soccer-wise was Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan, and he was already an Everton fan at that time. Donovan was on loan there, so I said, "Hey, I'll try Fulham." They've had some American players in the past, Dempsey being the most famous, and yeah, that's pretty much how it started. After that, I went to Penn State, and you obviously introduced me to soccer in a big way. Kind of just threw me onto the
culture
field.
Shock a little bit.
Yeah, kind of just threw me onto the pitch with a bunch of ex-high school players and guys that should be playing D3 somewhere, but they wanted to go to Penn State. So I'm like, wow, we're just going to jump right in there. But honestly, it was a great way to do it. I learned very quickly about the culture, and I think I improved pretty dramatically over that year or so, because I had to. There was no room for practice. Yeah,
especially early on, you had a lot of comments coming your way.
I did
not go over very well.
Nope. A lot of people were like, "Who the hell is this kid?" And I was like, "I don't even know why I'm here." You're right.
I'm with this guy. He got me here.
Yeah. So, but after a while, I got to a point where I could at least, hold my own on the same field. And ever since then, I've, sort of bloomed into a huge soccer enthusiast. I can tell you a lot about Fulham now, unfortunately, which is not a good thing. But I love soccer. It's one of my two favorite sports now, and I'm going on 7 or 8 years. So
yeah. What's the other one? Golf.
Golf is the other one. Yeah. Yeah.
Big shocker there. All right. So you already talked a little bit about your playing in the past.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick a position that you think you're most suited to play, what would it be?
Yeah, honestly, man. So it's funny you bring that up, because that's one of the reasons I think I'm not playing as much soccer anymore is I didn't have a true position. So I played out wide, not because I was fast or because I could dribble around people. It's because there were less people out there. So I was
especially in those pickup games.
Yes. So I was much better in isolation. A lot more time on the ball was a good thing for me. I knew how to get open and make runs. It was just that finishing product that sometimes could trouble me a little bit. And like I said, I was not a dribbler at all. So it was really, I could really pass and shoot. That's all I could do. I guess at 6'2", I would have been okay at striker, but again, I can't head the ball. No aerial presence whatsoever.
I saw his one header he ever had.
I have one career heading goal. My eyes were closed, and it went in somehow.
You didn't see it go in.
I had no idea it went in. Somebody told me. I was like, that went in, right? I was like, what? But no, striker wouldn't have suited me either, because I'm not physical enough. Can't hold the ball up. No aerial threat. So striker was out, and again, can't play the midfield because no quality touch on the ball, and defense. Don't even get me started. So I was kind of stuck at winger most of the time. I would play winger, and it just didn't really suit me as well. So I never had a true position. Right. I was more suited in the attack, but only limited help there.
Yeah, I understand. So if you had to compare your style of play to a professional player, who would you say?
Oh, good God. I mean, is there anyone with like miserable work rates that like doesn't do anything but pass and shoot? I don't know.
I feel like Paul Pogba can fit in there, huh?
Oh, geez. Yeah, Pogba has about the same touch as I do, right? No, I mean you go to guys like Arnautovic who are big and tall that play on the wing for some reason, but the difference is they're tremendous at dribbling, and I mean I don't think there's a professional that really
like Andrew Wenger.
Yeah, Andrew Wenger was also not actually a winger, but he played there for a long time.
And his touch was abysmal. We witnessed him dribble straight out of bounds. Literally under no pressure, just ran straight out.
That did happen. Maybe Wenger is the best example, actually, because I would do that from time to time.
All right, so I guess we'll move on from your playing career.
I'm now retired, by the way. Just
true.
Just a golfer.
Yeah.
I'll fill in a goalie if anyone needs me, but I'm now on to golf.
All right, so now on to your professional career that you've taken up. So you studied sports journalism at Penn State. So how did you get into that to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always liked to write for some reason. It was a very weird thing for a child. Most kids, I think, loathe that in high school. But I was in the literary club, and it was always an outlet for me. It was always kind of like a different language, and I could always write something that I couldn't say in a way. So that was really important. And of course, I always loved sports. My dad went to Penn State. He introduced me to Penn State football, and like I said, I grew up playing baseball and tennis, and then into soccer. So I wanted to try and find a way to merge those two together, and that was seemingly the route. Get into sports journalism. When I was at school, Penn State has a top 10 journalism program, one of the best student newspapers in the country that I was on staff with.
Collegiate.
Yeah, the Daily Collegian. So when I was there, I kind of envisioned, jumping right into the national stage and covering a national team. And I mean, you have to work your ass off to get that done. And the reality is most of the time you have to start much smaller. And I think we'll get into that coming up here. But yeah, sports journalism seemed like a natural fit to me because I could write and I enjoyed sports, and that was a way to combine the two professionally.
Nice. So you then, after graduation, moved up to Maine.
I did.
To cover the local newspaper up there.
Yeah, wow, what an experience that was.
So tell us about it.
So by the way, if you've never been to Maine, just don't even bother. It's there's not a whole lot there. It's very beautiful, but
drive through.
Just keep going. Just go to Montreal. Actually, is a much better destination. Just drive through, head up to Montreal. But no, it was a bit of a shock for me. Obviously, growing up in Tampa, I mean, I literally grew up on an island. So to go from that to the Arctic up in Maine was a bit of a transition. But I got.
Well, you already went through Penn State, which is pretty.
I did. So yeah, I was seasoned a little bit because of Penn State. The winters there are no slouch, but. Yeah, it was definitely a shocker. I was offered a job there in Maine, and for some reason in my head, I thought that was any different than Idaho or Wyoming. It really was not. It's not that much different. Boston is kind of sort of close, but not really. So, yeah, aside from the weather, though, it was, the toughest part about Maine is like it's just so isolating. And, I didn't know anyone up there. I had my good friend Sam was going to be living with me, but he didn't move in for a couple months until after I got up there. So it was, it was an interesting experience to say the least. Sorry.
It might be the most you have to say.
Yeah, honestly. But yeah, the work, I think the work was what I envisioned for the most part, diving into high school sports. But after growing up in Tampa at like a juggernaut of a high school athletically and seeing your guys' high school landscape, it's kind of like, wow, this is a different level of athleticism, a much lower one. So I had to adjust to that.
So when you say your guys, you mean Maine?
No. I mean, like you here,
me.
Like local
okay,
Philly. Yeah,
okay.
like you guys have a tremendous.
I see. Yes.
Tremendously competitive high school landscape here. It was the same thing in Florida, but in Maine, it's just not that. You have kids on the basketball team, and it's like, wait, didn't you also just play football? You're playing both. Okay, very good. Mm-hmm. It's very tiny there. Obviously, the schools are really small. Everything's isolated. And eventually I just had to get out. I learned a lot up there about, who I was and what I wanted to do. But as far as being compatible in Maine, I just absolutely not. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So when you are writing, do you have a standard process and procedure that you follow, similar to like how a player goes through rituals? Do you follow that same steps, or do you have just general, okay, it's time to write, I'm going to do it now?
Honestly, not necessarily. I mean, I of course was much more structured when I was working for a newspaper. So, the first thing I would do on every story is transcribe the quotes, and because to me that's sort of the meat of the story, and then you work your way around that. But no, I mean, now with Philly Soccer Page, I know we're going to get into that soon here as well. But I kind of just let it all out, man. I'm trying to get to a point where I can just kind of spit it all out on the page, and then work my way through and organize it that way. So I wouldn't say there's a structured way of doing it. Sometimes I'll write something and I'm like, that actually belongs at the bottom of the page. And, you kind of have to puzzle it around a little bit. Yeah. But no, honestly, for me, I don't have any kind of routine anymore. It's just kind of let it out as it comes out, and then edit after that.
And that makes sense. And now that you mentioned Philly Soccer Page, I guess we'll hop right into it. Good segue there.
Yeah.
So after covering a local sports like you did in Maine, you got connected with the city of Philadelphia and Philly Soccer Page. Mm-hmm. Tell us about how you initially got connected with them.
Sure. So when I moved back down to Philly, my idea was just get a summer job at this golf shop and then get back into the newspaper business. So Philly Soccer Page was really a filler during that time. I just wanted to keep my clips fresh and my website up to date. So I reached out to them, and of course we're all volunteer. So no one's paid to do any of it. Dan Walsh is the founder of PSP. He liked my resume and thought I had a good background. So I pretty much jumped right into it, and I went from driving out to this tiny little high school in the middle of nowhere, Maine, to covering the Union on a much bigger scale, and that was quite the jump as well.
Yeah. So do they only cover the Union? Like, what other sports or soccer do they cover?
Yeah, they cover all kinds of soccer, all kinds of local stuff. Bethlehem Steel, Penn FC, local high school stuff occasionally, things like that. So it's not just the Union. In fact, I started doing the Steel and the Union, and now I'm kind of just onto the Union. But they do a bunch of different things, and we. For instance, a few months back, I ran a story on Christian Pulisic, who, of course, is from Hershey, from the area. So anything at all that ties soccer to this area, we might potentially cover it.
So do they cover anything European based? Just like if there's a big game, do you highlight it at all, or
not really? No, I mean we do news roundups and kind of just do a little blurb about Zidane going back to Madrid or something like that. But we're really focusing on the local market. And part of the reason for that is, the Philly Inquirer and some other outlets do cover the Union, but it's all pretty much part-time work. I mean, there's no one in the city that really covers the Union full-time, because it's just not a full-time position. So we really try and dive into that from a number of angles and focus on Philly, because that's something the community wants.
That's great. And you said you were working with the Bethlehem Steel a little bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that experience? Is it more tedious? Did you actually enjoy?
Yeah. So I'll be perfectly honest. The Steel was not my favorite to cover. It's so now they're playing in Talon in the city, but last year they were playing in Bethlehem, which is a bit of a hike out to the mountains. They play in Lehigh's football stadium. It's always empty, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just a matter of circumstance. But the Steel wasn't my favorite because it just felt kind of high schooly, in the sense that not a whole lot of people were on board. Not a whole lot of people cared. You have your devoted soccer fans and everything, and that's great. But on a general scale, I don't think a whole lot of people are invested in Bethlehem Steel. It was a good place for me to start and kind of get a feel for the area and what kind of soccer is played here. But obviously the Union is much more interesting on a number of fronts.
And that makes sense completely. They're a really professional team that are marketable in the area. So it makes sense that it would be a little different.
Yeah.
So with Philly Soccer Page, when you get a topic that you're writing about, is it more you're being assigned a topic from somebody else, or are you actually picking your topic to write about?
Yeah, so it's definitely both. With the Seal, it was mostly covering the match. So I'm just out there writing a gamer or a match report. And then with the Union, it was, for me last year, it was a lot of match previews and player ratings. So go back and watch the match and rate the players by, scale of 1 to 10. But now I've sort of graduated to, I'm still doing match reports, of course, covering the matches, but
you're doing the one this week, right?
I'm doing the one this week. Yes. Okay. Atlanta United, on the road this Sunday.
I'll be listening to my commentary as we watch the game together. So that might be, you might see a little bit of my sway in the article.
I might have to put my headphones in. But yeah, I'll be covering that Sunday evening for PSP. So follow along if you're interested in that. But I've also graduated a lot to columns, which is really, kind of up to me as far as an idea or what's prevalent right now. So for instance, after the first match, Madun Union had a nightmare out there at the number 6, and I wrote a column about how I think it's time for Derek Jones to get a chance, and that seemed to garner a lot of attention. So it's stuff like that. You try and be current, you try and be relevant, but a lot of it is now up to me to come up with ideas. So
are the columns what you really want to be doing long term, or do you want to be doing more match reports?
Yeah, it's funny, man. So we didn't really get into this. I don't foresee myself in journalism professionally again. I look at it now as more of a hobby, honestly. Okay. If I were to get back into it, yeah, that's what I'd like to be doing is columns and match coverage, something on that level. Okay. But honestly, now I'm kind of happy with my job in the golf business and where that's going, and I'm writing a book. I'm trying to write a book, and that to me is actually a lot more interesting than a lot of the soccer stuff. Of course, I love the soccer stuff, but yes, to answer your question hypothetically, if I were to get back into journalism, I would want to do more columns and higher level match coverage for sure.
Okay, that makes sense, and that sounds interesting to me, so I can understand why it would be to a journalism major.
Right.
So you said there is a split between what you're assigned versus what you get to choose to do. If you had to put a percentage on that, what would you say?
I mean, last year it was obviously a lot more assignments. I would say probably 75% last year were assignments, 25% were columns on the Steel. This year it's really going to be 50-50, if not a little bit more for me doing a column. So I'll do a column, either every week or every other week and do some assignments. So probably 50-50 for me this year, but it's all going to be on the Union. So I'm not covering the Seal this season. So it'll all be based on the Union.
Okay, cool. So a little bit more in the comments from other people and interactions with the viewers or readers.
Yeah.
How do you see, I guess, the comments coming in? Because from my point of view, it's a lot of negative feedback most of the time, more so than positive feedback.
Yeah.
Do you share that point of view, which just sounds like you do? And are you able to ignore it? Do you respond to it? Are you able to bury it away, or do you actually interact?
No, man, there's no chance I'll ever respond. So it's a great question, because when I was in Maine, I didn't have any of that. So I think one of the most interesting transitions for me was, I'll be up in Maine covering a story and I'll spend 3 or 4 days on it. And at the end of the day, I get no feedback there. Who is actually reading this article? Is it the parents? Is it the kids? Is it the school administrators? Probably, but I never knew about it. Then I come down here in Philly and all of a sudden I'm a volunteer for a soccer page, and I get a lot of people reading my stuff, and it's kind of disheartening from a journalistic perspective. But at the same time, I embrace the comments because I love that people are engaging in the commentary and actually reading the story. So I often find it funny when someone comments negatively. I've passed that along with our friends.
I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Many times. But no, it's just great that the idea behind a column is to spark a conversation. That's what you're really trying to do. So in Maine, there was no conversation. It was just, here's what happened at this girls' field hockey game. And frankly, I don't blame you for not giving a shit about that. But on the soccer page, it's like, here, this is what's going on with the Union. Like, we should talk about this. And as a whole, I love the comments. I think my Derek Jones piece had like 40 comments on it. I mean, people just really got into a good discussion about it. and that's pretty cool. Honestly, even if a fourth of those comments are negative, that's really cool that you get some feedback and you can garner discussion.
I mean, even if they're all negative, you're getting feedback and you're getting the discussions.
Absolutely, and people are reading the story. Exactly right. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of them aren't negative at all. Exactly. They're just kind of working off the commentary and starting a discussion. So I've actually grown to love the comments on Philly Soccer Page for that reason.
So would you say more are negative, more are positive, or are they kind of just making their own commentary and it's not either?
The third. Okay. The third is the most popular, frankly. The most that I see is someone might say, I agree with this, but now I'm going to go off on my own tangent. Or this is how I feel about this. Not really anything to do with your article. Now, sometimes there are negative comments like, how could you possibly think that? And then there's other comments where it's like, hey, by the way, this stat is wrong. Oh, okay, thank you. That might be the one I comment to sometimes, reply back to. But I would say most of the time, people read the article and then just kind of go off with their own ideas. So it's only slightly related.
Okay.
Very few are actually purely negative, I would say.
All right, that makes sense. I feel like most of the time people are just trying to voice their opinions anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's great. So hopping into a new topic is going to be more Fulham focused now.
Christ.
So
can I get another beer?
Yeah. Well, you're probably going to want a different one than that one, huh?
Yeah, by the way, this is absolutely terrible.
He's drinking Beck's Light.
I grabbed it out of the fridge because there was nothing. It's not beer at all. It's actually just water. So now, I might.
That is my parents' favorent beer.
Now I know.
For some reason, I honestly cannot tell you why. It is 2.4% alcohol. 64 calories, but is not worth it at all.
It's not worth it. I'd rather have like a Seagram's, like those colorful fruity drinks that are like 2%. This was terrible. So that's very good.
Yeah. So for all those who didn't know, that's what he was drinking. I'm drinking Bud Light over here. Okay, so pretty basic.
Only slightly better.
Only maybe a little better.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you're eased in a little bit,
on to Fulham. Let's get
on to Fulham.
Let's get.
Tell us how that started. I guess you did a little bit.
Yeah, so I touched on that. It was mainly because of Clint Dempsey. And I think a lot of American Fulham fans can credit Dempsey for their fanhood. So I used them on FIFA. For all you Ultimate Team fans out there, the FIFA 12 Blue Dempsey was really what solidified me as a Fulham fan. But like I said, it's not just Dempsey. There have been a lot of Americans at Fulham, and a lot of famous ones. Casey Keller.
Brian McBride
is another big one at striker. Carlos Bocanegra at center back. So Fulham is one of those English clubs that have given a big chance to American players, and not a lot of clubs do that. So, but aside from that, after a while, I determined Fulham was just perfect for me. There are no glory hunters at our club. It's you have to be dedicated to the soccer, and it's really perfect. It's a quaint little club in West London. It's very small, right down the street from Chelsea. And for black and white, for those of you that know me, that's perfectly fitting for my life. So black and white colors.
It's very symbolic.
It's very symbolic. So I'm never going back. I love Fulham. I love English soccer, but at the same time, I hate bandwagon fans that just, oh yeah, I'm a United fan, and it's like, okay, why though? Like, are you from Manchester? So Fulham's a great club, and I'm happy to be part of that lineage.
So when you said I thought you were going to say you hate being a Fulham fan as well. So
yes, in 2019, yes, I do.
So how are you feeling about their season so far? I know it's not going to be good.
No, so we're done and dusted. It's interesting that we keep Slavisa Jokanovic, our manager that really transformed our club and got us into the Premier League. We keep him around. That's not working. So we bring in a Premier League winner in Claudio Ranieri. And somehow we get worse. I mean, that just goes to show you that the signings that we made were not correct. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. Over £100 million did absolutely nothing. And yeah, we're done and dusted. I love that Scotty Parker is manning things now. He's going to figure out who's actually dedicated to the club, who wants to stick around and fight this out. We're going back to the championship. So now the question is, can we get enough in return to buy some players and get right back up? That's going to be the ultimate goal.
Do you think Scott Parker is the right hire and you want to keep him around?
I do. I want to keep him 100%. He was there He was there last season under Jokanovic. He stayed when Ranieri came on. There's no man right now that knows the club better. If you listen to him in interviews, he truly cares about the players, and he's proud to be wearing a Fulham shirt. I think you give him a chance. He was obviously a pretty successful player in his own right. He made a lot of caps for England. He was the England captain at one point, played for Tottenham. So he knows his way around English football. But at a club like Fulham, it's not about
England captain.
He was an England captain.
Oh, like for a game?
I believe he had one cap as a captain. But at a club like Fulham, it's not about big time money players as we've seen. It's about being dedicated to the club and really giving it your all. And so I think it's great that he's in right now. We're going to see who wants to stick around and fight with us next season.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going into next season, what do you think the main focus has to be in the transfer window for you guys to bounce back to the Premier League?
Yeah, so honestly, I think it needs to start with getting rid of guys like Jean-Michael Seri and Andre Schürrle. I love those guys coming in, but they're just, they're not team players, and I'm going to be open and honest about that. They're just not. They have not meshed as a unit all season. So these big money guys that came over from France and Germany, they're very talented and successful at the world level, but it takes more than that to win in the Premier League. So I think we get as much money for guys like that as we can, and keep the guys that truly want to stick around. I surely hope that's Mitrovic, because he's a very gifted striker. I doubt he'll stay. He's just too good. But those big money guys, I'm not really interested in them in the Championship, because that's not what we did to get up in the first place. We used consistent guys in the lineup: Tim Reen, Kevin McDonald, the guys that were there. Ryan Sessegnon was tremendous in the Championship, Tom Kearney. So if those guys are going to stick around again, let's build around not the big money players, but the guys that want to be playing for Fulham and that can get us back up.
All right. So anything else you want to add on Fulham before we hop over to this side of the Atlantic?
No, that's it really. Again, it's been tough. It's been cool to be watching us every week nationally. That's pretty sweet. But yeah, it's been tough. But just know, fellow Fulham supporters, I am not discouraged. We will be back. I love our ownership and I love our core players. So don't be discouraged. We'll be back up pretty soon.
Okay, yeah, and I hope so, because I love the club of Fulham. I think that it's awesome to have that rivalry with Chelsea, because that club is just disgusting.
I hate Chelsea.
And we'll hop over to the Union, who I am a huge fan of, Seabass, or Christian Sandler, sorry, for those of you, which I am going to talk about later at the end of the podcast.
Sure we will. Yeah.
So how did you become a Union fan, being from Tampa? Pretty much.
Well, I mean, obviously there's no soccer in Tampa other than the Rowdies. And the Rowdies, when I was in school living down there, were nothing. I mean, they were.
And they signed all these big players.
Yeah, exactly. So the Rowdies were still very small. Like I said, I wasn't into soccer at all. So it was only fair to me to give my fanhood to the Philly club, because that's when my soccer started, was up here. But to be totally honest, this year, more than ever, I don't feel like a fan anymore. I'm covering the team. I feel as though I have to be objective. But
it's hard to be a fan. So.
It is hard to be a fan. So I'm kind of more relaxed in that nature. But certainly the first 3 or 4 years that I was living in this area, I was a Union fan for that reason. And they have a lot of passionate fans here, man. I mean, the Sons of Ben is one of the coolest fan bases in the league. So,
yeah, absolutely. If you haven't seen their documentary on Netflix, definitely check that out. It's really well done.
It's pretty sweet.
So yeah, any thoughts on the Union and how they're going to get better? Will they get better? What they should expect this season?
Oh man, yeah. So I've written a couple pieces on Philly's soccer page that will better explain this, but. If I was a fan, I got to be honest, I would not be optimistic right now, because it's essentially the sporting director that has changed the formation, not the coach. You've got a bunch of wingers on the roster. You've got midfielders that aren't tracking back and not defending. So it's kind of like you're trying to implement this new system, but you don't necessarily have the players for it. Obviously, it hasn't worked in the first couple of games, and oh, by the way, now you're going to play the league champs, so on the road. So I would not be optimistic. I'm sort of on record as saying I don't think Curtin is the answer long term. if I had to make a prediction, I would say that he is out at the end of the season. And I don't think that would be a bad thing.
If that long.
If that long.
Yeah.
I really don't think keeping him around is going to do the club much good at this point. I like Marco Fabian, although he had a horrendous game in Kansas City. And ultimately, I think a lot of people took Deutsch Call for granted. I mean, 18 assists is absurd, and it was the league leader. You're not going to replace that. So it's going to be a tough season for the Union. I think the East is manageable, so I think they'll fight for a playoff spot. But I don't see how you could reasonably think that the Union are going to do anything in the playoffs because they haven't done that before. So.
Yeah, and we haven't ever won a game that really mattered at the end of the day. We didn't win a playoff game. We haven't won a final yet, and we've been to 3 of those.
Yeah,
so
0 for 3 in the U.S. Open Cup is very troubling.
I mean, the fact that we made it is saying one thing, like we can, but we just can't get over that last hurdle.
You have to finish the job, and a couple of those were at home. So it was, very tough.
Yeah, so anything else you have to add before I ask you my last question? Anything we missed?
Question.
Yeah.
No, man, that's pretty much it. I think we got it pretty much covered. Come on, you Whites.
All right. So I think Dave asks this to everyone.
Yeah.
But what, if you had to pick one, is the thing you're most excited about in world soccer right now?
In world soccer, wow.
You could take a second to think.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Honestly, I think I'm a big fan of VAR. I know a lot of guys aren't, but I think that's so much better for the game than the present model of human error. So. I think VAR is going to lead to a lot of correct calls going forward when it's implemented everywhere. So I guess that would be the answer. Obviously the Champions League is interesting right now, so I'm always interested in that. But I would say VAR is a very good thing for the game, and I'm looking forward to that being implemented all across the world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's going to solve a lot of issues, even though I still think it has some things to work out.
Got to iron out some flaws.
There are some calls that I just hands down disagree with that VAR has just called, and I just don't understand. So,
100%.
But that's for another day.
100%.
I guess I'll ask you about the Champions League now that we have our final 8. The draw will be this Friday.
Okay.
We'll be going over this on the podcast this upcoming Sunday, I'm sure. But I'll ask you, what do you think of the 8 teams that are now through in the Champions League, and who are you thinking is the favorite at this point?
Oh man, well, you got to be pretty excited as a neutral now with Juventus going through. I think everyone wants Ronaldo in that final 8. And you've got Barcelona, you got Man City, who just absolutely walloped Schalke. Why is there ever a 7-0 at this point in the season? That's absurd.
Schalke, I don't know what happened to them this year, but they're
struggling mightily in the
league.
Yes. No, I think the top 8 is brilliant. Frankly, I prefer Liverpool going through at this point over Bayern, just because I think they're
more exciting.
They have a little more flash.
Yeah.
They got to the final, so I'm selfishly happy Liverpool is there. Also, as an England soccer fan, I'd like to see as many English clubs as possible.
All four
is pretty big. Tottenham's still there. I think City's got to be the favorite, man. And I hate to say that because I'm not a fan of City, but if they're on their game, I don't think anyone can beat them. And I say, why is there a 7-0 result in the Champions League like that? Maybe it's just because City's that good. And I mean, are any of these other teams beating Schalke 7-0? I'm not sure. So I think City is the favorite, but obviously Juventus is going to be rolling after that result against Atletico coming back. And don't count out Liverpool again. I mean, you made the final, and obviously they can do it again. So I would say City's the favorite, but I'm just pumped as a neutral to be watching the biggest clubs in the world.
Who do you think would be the best 2 teams to match up in the quarterfinal that neutrals and fans alike would just be interested in watching?
Personally, I would love to see Ronaldo against that Man City team, because it's kind of like, it's kind of like City plays high level competition week in and week out in the Premier League, but it's not often that they come up against a pure superstar like that. Then again, I would like to see Juventus against just about everyone. So, that would be a good matchup. I'd also like to see Liverpool Barcelona, because you've got the Coutinho element there. That would be Suarez as well, former Liverpool guys. That would be a fun matchup. But you can't really go wrong. I mean, it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And even Barcelona versus Juventus, you get Messi versus Ronaldo again, and that would be very interesting.
Everyone would love that, sure.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I think the worst case scenario for Man City and Liverpool's if they play each other. I think both teams do not want to play against each other at all. And it would be really interesting to neutral fans. But as a Liverpool fan, that is my worst fear, playing against Man City. And I think City would tell you the same thing about Liverpool.
We've seen that story a couple times already. A final or a semifinal would be one thing. But, yeah, right now I think they would certainly like to avoid each other.
Yeah, in the quarterfinals, that's where they met last year. Liverpool absolutely dominated them in the first leg, and then they just couldn't fight back.
Right.
It would be a very different story this time around. And
I agree.
I think both teams just hands down want anybody else at this point.
Absolutely. For sure.
So that's all my questions. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on social media and anywhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Twitter handle is @by Christian Sand. By because of the writing stuff.
BY.
That's right. And yeah, I run the Philly Soccer Page Twitter account from time to time as well. I'll be running it Sunday evening when the Union play Atlanta United. So you can find me there. I'm big on Twitter. You'll see a lot of Fulham tweets, and you'll see some pop culture stuff, some movie stuff, and of course you can find me on the BTS podcast. I'll be back soon, I'm sure, as the number one guest.
There you go. So that's all we have for this podcast here. It was great seeing you. Great having you on, Christian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.
Before we finish up, I'll tell you why I call him Lil Seabass.
Oh, this is good. Yeah.
So in college, this is some exclusive content, everybody. So in college, he was referred to as Christian 2 by our friend Tina. So Tina, you're on the podcast. I hope you're listening.
There's a shout out.
So it then progressed when my mom called him Little Christian to Little Christian.
Slightly ironic because I'm very tall, but okay.
Yeah,
sure, little.
I guess maybe.
Okay.
After that, my cousin Billy heard that name and was like, like Lil Sebastian from Parks and Rec. So all you Parks and Rec fan will enjoy that one. So he's not a pony. He is a human man.
Yes.
But Lil Sebastian is just iconic. And so we shortened that up, made it Lil Seabass, and he's just been that ever since. And there you go. Hope everybody enjoyed that little anecdote. And I guess that's it.
Yeah, for the record, I've never seen Parks and Rec. So just take that for what it's worth. I don't even know what Sebastian is. So,
but Tina looks like Leslie Knope. So there you go.
Okay, sure. I'll take
it.
Your
all
word
comes
for
around.
It. All right.
Very good. So that's it for Bros Talking Soccer interview with Christian Sandler. Thanks for stopping by, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday for the Bros Talking Soccer podcast with Matt and Dave. I will see you guys later. Have a good one.